She was born when I was 42, after 6 failed rounds of IVF and a miscarriage that nearly broke me in half. When they placed her in my arms, I whispered her name like a prayer, Talia. I told myself then, I would give her a life so soft she'd never feel the sharp edges of the world. And for 31 years, I kept that promise. I worked 2 jobs, skipped meals, gave up vacations, turned down love. All so she could have everything I never did. But nothing prepares you for the day your child rewrites the story you built together and erases you from the page entirely. You see, this isn't a revenge story in the way you'd think. There's no screaming, no courtroom battles, no slammed doors. This is the quiet kind, the kind where love is weaponized, then discarded, the kind where the deepest cuts come from silence. When you have a child late in life, everything feels both harder and more sacred. I was 42 when I had Talia, after years of fertility treatments and more heartbreak than I ever dared admit. I was alone in that hospital room when she was born. Her father had walked out when I told him I wanted to keep trying. But when they placed her in my arms, under the humming fluorescence and the sound of thunder rattling the window panes, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt chosen. I named her Talia Grace. I used to say she saved me from a life of watching time pass instead of living it. Every choice I made from that moment on was for her. I took a job as a 3rd-grade teacher, kept it for over 30 years. It didn't pay much, but it let me be home by 4 p.m. to help her with homework, pack lunches, sew Halloween costumes. At night, I'd tutor high schoolers to cover her ballet classes, her braces, the little gold locket she wanted at age 10 because she'd seen one in a movie and whispered, I want to carry something close to my heart. I gave up a lot without even calling it sacrifice. I gave up dates, vacations, new shoes. I remember once standing in a department store, holding a cashmere scarf I wanted so badly my fingers trembled. But she'd just made the soccer team, and the fee was due. I put the scarf back. Every Saturday, I made pancakes, blueberry when she was little, chocolate chip when she got older. We had this ritual, matching pajamas on Friday nights, movie marathons with popcorn, her head in my lap as she fell asleep before the credits rolled. I still have those pajamas, by the way, somewhere in a drawer. She called me Mama longer than most kids did. When she was in high school, she'd pretend to roll her eyes at me in front of friends, but at night, she'd crawl into bed with me during thunderstorms. Just like when she was 5, whispering, just until the thunder stops. I didn't just raise her. I wrapped my life around her like a quilt, stitching every moment, every gesture, with care, her lunch notes, her birthday parties, the scrapbook I made every single year with printed photos and captions in my best cursive. Even when she went off to college, I'd mail her cookies and handwritten cards. She never asked me to, but she always said thank you. Always signed off her texts with love you, Mama. I never remarried, not because no one asked. There was George, the quiet dentist with kind eyes who brought me flowers. And Ellen, my neighbor, once joked that I'd missed my window, but truthfully, I didn't feel I lacked anything. I had Talia. She made me feel enough. When she came back from college and started working in the city, we slipped into a new rhythm. Weekend brunches, walks through the botanical garden. She'd call me on her lunch break, sometimes just to say she missed my voice. And then, 3 years ago, she met Micah. I'll admit, I liked him. He had that kind of presence that doesn't demand a room but quietly anchors it. Polite, soft-spoken. He carried her bags without being asked, laughed at her worst jokes, and listened, really listened when you spoke. More than that, she glowed around him. I hadn't seen that kind of light in her face since she was 16 and got accepted into that arts program in Boston. When they got engaged, I cried, not from sadness, but from something close to awe. I thought, this is it. I've done my job. She's happy. She's safe. I started a little wedding notebook, not to control anything, just to help. Quotes I liked, a list of local vendors, a sketch of a bouquet I thought she might love. Nothing pushy, just a mother wanting to be useful. I even began crafting her wedding gift in secret, a necklace, delicate gold, with a heart-shaped pendant inside the charm, melted down and recast, was my mother's wedding ring. I'd held onto it for decades, always intending to pass it down when the time felt right. I had the words, "Always your mom," etched in looping script on the back. I imagined pinning it around her neck the morning of the wedding, whispering, "No matter where life takes you, you'll carry us with you." We had one magical afternoon where it almost felt like the old days. She came over with a wedding magazine and 2 lattes. We sat at the kitchen table, flipping through pages, giggling at ridiculous dress sleeves, circling flower arrangements. For a moment, it was just me and her again, our little universe. I didn't know then that it would be the last time she asked me what I thought. What followed was a slow, quiet pulling away. Her texts turned practical. Our weekly brunches became maybe next week. When I suggested dress shopping together, she replied, "I think Evelyn's already booked appointments." Evelyn, Micah's mother. I didn't mind sharing. I just didn't realize I'd be replaced. At first, I thought I was imagining it. I told myself she was busy, stressed, that all brides go through a season of chaos. But something in my gut felt different. There was a hollowness in her voice, a rehearsed kind of politeness, like she was talking to someone she didn't trust not to break. I didn't confront her. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just kept holding on, one memory at a time, while something slipped, quietly, out of reach. And in that space, I began to wonder, is there a way to love someone so much you disappear behind it? I didn't know it yet, but the answer would come, not in a shout, not in a slammed door, but in a single, clipped phone call that changed everything. I should have known the shift wasn't just stress. It started small, Talia canceling our Sunday brunch, then rescheduling our dress shopping day because Evelyn already took me to that boutique. At first, I didn't question it. I thought, it's her wedding, her timing, her life. But then, the language started changing. Where she once said, "What do you think of this?" she now said, "Evelyn says." I tried to be gracious. I did. I nodded through it. Told myself I was being overly sensitive. Told myself, "Clarisse, you raised a confident woman. Let her be one." But there's a difference between letting go and being pushed out. One afternoon, Talia invited me to brunch downtown with her, Micah, and Evelyn. I took extra care getting ready, wore the pale blue blouse she'd always said made my eyes look like a winter sky. I curled my hair, brought a pamphlet in my purse about a florist. One of my former students had just opened a shop, and her work was stunning. They were already seated when I arrived. Micah stood to greet me, ever polite. Talia smiled, but not the way she used to. It was the kind of smile you give a coworker, not your mother. "Mom," she said, flat. "You made it." We made small talk. I asked the server if they had a vegetarian omelet, and Evelyn muttered, "Oh, one of those." I chuckled softly, trying to brush it off. Talia gave a small, stiff laugh. She didn't defend me. Then Micah mentioned the guest list was finalized. I smiled. Hopeful. "Oh, that's exciting. Did you pick a florist yet?" I pulled the pamphlet halfway out of my purse. "One of my former students, she's just getting started. But her arrangements are, we've got it under control." Talia cut in. I froze. She didn't say it unkindly, but she said it like a period. Final, full stop. "I know," she said, her voice soft, but firm. "It's just already taken care of." Micah looked down at his plate. Evelyn sipped her mimosa like it was tea at the Queen's Palace. I slid the pamphlet back into my bag, cheeks burning. I laughed, just a little, like I wasn't fazed. "Of course," I said, but something inside me cracked, small but loud. Not because she didn't want my help, but because she looked embarrassed that I had offered. That night, I sat on my couch with the TV on mute. I replayed her face over and over, the cool smile, the sharp tone. I kept wondering, when did my excitement start to feel like a burden to her? And maybe you've been there too. Maybe someone you love made you feel like your presence wasn't a gift. It was an inconvenience. If that's ever happened to you, you understand how quiet that heartbreak is. It doesn't scream, It just settles, slowly, into your bones. From that brunch on, things didn't return to normal. They got colder. She stopped calling. Her texts became dry. No love you at the end. I'd send her photos of old things, our matching pajama selfies, the veil I wore at my wedding that I offered as her something old. She didn't reply for days. And when she did, going with something different. Thanks. No warmth. Just a sentence and a period. Always a period. I offered to handwrite the invitations, like we used to do together for holiday cards. She replied, already handled. I suggested a small get-together for her college friends in my backyard. Lemonade, string lights, laughter. She texted back, it's not the vibe we're going for. No thanks. Mom, just silence dressed up as planning. One day, I stopped by her apartment with a basket of cookies and chamomile tea, her favorites. Micah answered the door. He looked surprised. She's not really feeling up to visitors right now, he said, polite as always. I can just leave it. I offered. He nodded, accepted the basket. A week later, the box was returned to me, unopened. It was subtle, all of it. No one shouted. No one slammed a door, but every little moment said the same thing. You're not part of this anymore. I wanted to say something. I wanted to ask her what happened, but I didn't want to be the mother who made her wedding about herself. So I kept quiet. Then came the real blow. I was in the kitchen making lentil soup, something warm for a cold Thursday. My phone dinged. A notification. You've been added to Talia's Bridal Babes group chat. My heart fluttered. Maybe this was it. Maybe she was looping me in. Maybe she was ready to bring me back. I opened the chat. At first, it was harmless. Dresses, colors, table settings. Then came the jokes. Snarky, gossipy messages from bridesmaids. Oh no, another overbearing mom moment incoming. If she wears white, I'm walking out. She'll probably cry and make a scene. And then, buried between emojis and sass, I saw Talia's message. She means well, but she's just too much sometimes. Everything turns into a guilt trip. I honestly don't have the energy. I stared at the screen. Not once, not twice, over and over, rereading it like the words might change. They didn't. That soup boiled over behind me, hissing like it knew what I'd just seen. But I didn't move. I didn't respond. I didn't message her. I just stood there, like I'd been struck. Then I left the group quietly, without saying a word. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where we used to eat pancakes, where I used to cut crusts off her sandwiches and listen to her practice her vows for student council. I looked at the empty chair across from me and realized she wasn't coming back to it, not in the way she used to, not in the way that still called me mama. And that's when it stopped being about the wedding. It became about something much deeper, about being slowly, methodically erased, without screaming, without warning, without goodbye. The morning of the wedding, I woke up before the sun. The house was still, that eerie kind of quiet that doesn't feel peaceful. It feels hollow. I stood at the edge of my bed, staring at the garment bag that hung from the closet door. The dress inside was blush pink, soft and understated, chosen with care months ago, the kind of dress a mother wears when she wants to be seen, but not overshadow. I took it out, unzipped the bag, and ran my hands over the fabric. I slipped it on anyway, not because I was going anywhere, but because I needed to remember who I was when I chose it. The woman who still believed she'd have a seat, a toast, a moment to pin a necklace around her daughter's neck and whisper, "You'll always be my baby." I walked down to the kitchen and turned on the coffee pot. Even though I knew I wouldn't drink any, the gift sat in the center of the table, wrapped carefully in cream ribbon. A box just big enough to hold a necklace and a letter. The letter was still folded inside, unread, unsent. I tied the ribbon one more time, like it might still mean something. Like some thread of hope was left, but the phone didn't ring. The door didn't knock. No one changed their mind. By 10 o'clock, the ceremony had likely begun. I imagined it. Talia walking down an aisle I hadn't seen, to music I hadn't heard, holding flowers I hadn't helped pick. I pictured Evelyn standing somewhere close, Maybe adjusting her veil, smiling for the cameras. Maybe they called her mom that day. I thought I might cry. I didn't. I just sat in that dress, at that table, staring at the gift that would never be opened. There was something about that stillness, how loud it was, how even the walls seemed to look at me with pity. Around noon, I went upstairs, took off the dress, and folded it gently into the bottom drawer beneath old scarves and photos from better days. I didn't hang it back up. I didn't want to see it again. I put on my softest robe, the one that smells like lavender and fabric softener, curled up on the couch, and wrapped a blanket around myself like armor. Still no calls. I opened social media. Even though I knew better, there she was, Talia, in a lace dress, radiant and glowing. Micah beside her, handsome as ever. They looked perfect. The kind of perfect you see on the cover of wedding magazines. The kind that makes you wonder if you imagine the hurt. I scrolled through the comments. "You look stunning! Such a beautiful couple. Your mom must be so proud." Not one person asked where I was. Then I saw it, a picture of Talia and Evelyn, cheeks pressed together, arms around each other like they'd been mother and daughter forever. The caption read, "To my second mom, thank you for making everything so magical. Second mom," like I had been a placeholder, like all the scraped knees, late night crying fits, field trips, birthday cakes, and lullabies were nothing more than rehearsal for someone else to step in. I stared at the screen until the image blurred, not from tears, just shock. The kind that doesn't crash in, it creeps in and sits heavy in your lungs. That night, I didn't sleep. I got up around midnight and went to the fridge. Inside sat a cake I'd made the day before. 3 layers, chocolate and raspberry, Talia's favorite. I'd planned to slice it that evening, light a candle, and toast her from afar. Instead, I took it out, ripped off the lid, and dumped it straight into the trash. Not because I was angry, not because I wanted her to know, just because I couldn't look at it anymore. It hurt to see something made with love sit untouched. I sank to the floor, back pressed to the cabinet, knees to my chest, and let the grief roll over me. Not the kind that wails, the kind that silently presses against every rib until you can't breathe. I cried for the little girl who used to call me Mama. I cried for every packed lunch, every bedtime story, every silly inside joke we used to share. I cried because I had done everything I could and somehow still wasn't enough. And then I stopped crying. I just sat for hours, not thinking, not moving, just existing. A few days later, I started cleaning, not the surface stuff, the deep kind. I pulled out drawers filled with saved receipts, gift bags, thank you cards I never got to send, the hope chest I had tucked away for her, tea towels, monogrammed napkins, a set of wine glasses etched with her initials, gone, boxed up, put away. At the very bottom of one drawer, I found the necklace box, the one I had wrapped, untouched, unopened. I sat back down at the table, laid it gently in front of me like it was something sacred, and I stared at it, not because I wanted to cry again, but because I needed to remember what it had cost me to give that love, to pour myself into someone who no longer saw me, to raise a daughter and still lose her to whatever this was, influence, fear, another woman's shadow. I didn't blame Evelyn. Not really. She saw an opening and filled it. But it wasn't her wedding she erased me from. It was my daughter's, Talia's, and that was something I couldn't make sense of. Because the pain of being rejected isn't just about being excluded. It's about being forgotten by the one person who should have remembered you best. There's no funeral for this kind of grief. No casseroles dropped off. No thinking of you cards. Just silence and an ache that has nowhere to go. And maybe, in that ache, I began to realize something. I wasn't waiting for her to remember me. I was waiting to remember myself. It started, like many things do, in the quiet. About a week after the wedding, I walked past the hallway mirror and caught a glimpse of myself. Not just my face, but the way I was moving through my house like a guest. Slippers dragging, shoulders caved in, like I'd been trying to disappear, and maybe I had. The house felt different now. Not because anything had changed, but because the wedding came and went. No one called. No thank you card. No photo, just silence. One morning, I brewed a cup of tea, not for comfort, just out of habit, and walked to the dining table where the gift still sat, untouched. The cream ribbon had loosened at the edges. The letter was still inside. I hadn't reread it since the day I wrote it. So I sat down, unwrapped the box slowly. Like opening a memory I didn't know how to face. I unfolded the letter. My handwriting was shakier than I remembered. But the words, they were still mine. You were never a burden. You were the center of my world. I didn't raise you to owe me anything. I raised you to walk into this life knowing that you were loved, holy and without condition. And if I am not beside you on this day, it is not because I don't love you. It's because sometimes love means letting go of the picture we thought we'd be in. I hope you carry this with you. Not the necklace, but the knowing that you are seen. Always, even when you look away. I finished reading and just sat there, not crying, not breaking. I just breathed, because for the first time in weeks, I wasn't waiting for someone else to explain the pain to me. I was sitting with it, and it was mine. That afternoon, I opened the drawer in my bedroom and pulled out the necklace. I held it up to the window. The light caught the tiny etching on the back. Always your mom. It sparkled, but not in a showy way, just enough to say I'm still here. I put it on. No ceremony, no mirror moment. Just fastened the clasp and let it rest against my collarbone. And I wore it out. I walked to the park near my house, the same one where I used to take Talia on Sunday afternoons. There was a little bench by the duck pond. I used to sit there with her sippy cup, balanced on one knee while feeding stale bread to birds. Now it was just me, and that should have made me feel hollow, but it didn't, because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't remembering Talia as the daughter who cut me out. I was remembering her as the girl who once held my hand and said, "I love when we come here. Just us. Just us." I went home and opened a notebook I hadn't touched in years. Started writing again. Just little things, memories, thoughts, quotes I liked. I made tea with real lemon, not the powder. I signed up for a library class on memoir writing. I sorted through old photographs and made an album just for me, not to show anyone, just to keep, and I stopped checking her social media. That might sound simple, but it was the hardest thing I did, because letting go of the idea that she might suddenly remember me, might post something that proved I still mattered, that's not a small step. It's a leap, but I made it, because I couldn't spend the rest of my life waiting for someone else to put me back in their story. I had my own story. I had mornings, and books, and neighbors who smiled when I passed. I had George from the market, who always gave me a second bunch of daisies because you look like a daisy kind of lady. I had Miss Patel down the street, who started inviting me to her book club. I had silence, but not the kind that crushed me, the kind that let me breathe. And that's when I realized something I never expected to believe. I didn't need Talia to apologize. I didn't even need her to come back, because what I needed, what I had forgotten, was myself. Not the mother version of me, not the woman who spent decades giving every ounce of her being to make sure her child never felt unloved. Just Clarisse, the girl who once loved poetry and lemon cake and dancing in the kitchen when no one was watching. The woman who had opinions and a laugh that took over rooms when she let it. The one who always thought she needed to be needed to feel real. Turns out, she was real all along. She just got quiet. And maybe that's what this part of life is about, not being the center of someone else's universe anymore, but learning how to take up space in your own. So when the mail arrived the following Friday, I didn't flinch. I opened bills. I read an old card from a former student who still sends me updates every spring. And when I walked past the mirror again, I paused, straightened my spine, smiled at my reflection. The necklace gleamed softly beneath my collar. It didn't feel like a wound anymore. It felt like a vow I had made to myself, a quiet promise. I'm still here. I still matter. And I am no longer waiting for permission to take up space in this world. I went back to the kitchen, turned on the radio, and danced barefoot while the kettle hissed. There was no audience, no applause, just me. And somehow, that was enough. The truth is, no one noticed when I began to change. That's the beautiful part about getting older. People stop watching. They think your story's already been told. They assume you've settled into the slow fade, like background music in a room they're no longer listening to. But something was shifting inside me, not with fanfare, not with anger, just quietly, like a candle being relit. I started every morning the same way, making my own breakfast with intention, not leftovers, not toast from the freezer. I'd slice strawberries, brew fresh coffee, sit in the sunniest corner of the kitchen, and eat like I was someone worth slowing down for. I'd spent so many years rushing, cooking for others, cleaning up after others, waiting for a text, a knock, a request. Now, no one was asking anything of me. For the first time, I wasn't anyone's emergency, and instead of feeling lost, I felt light. I didn't delete the photos. I didn't rip up old cards or throw away the scrapbook labeled Talia's childhood. No, I kept those. But I moved them from the living room bookshelf to the bottom of a chest in the guest room. Not out of spite, just out of peace. I needed to see less of the girl I used to mother and more of the woman I was rediscovering. One day, I walked into the community center downtown and asked about volunteering. The woman at the front desk blinked at me like she didn't expect anyone my age to be offering their time. Tutoring, I said. I was a teacher for 30 years. I'm good with kids. That's how I met Jasmine, a 14-year-old with a guarded heart and a brilliant mind. She didn't speak much at first, but I recognized the look in her eyes, like the world had taught her not to expect kindness without condition. Week after week, we sat together in the corner of that fluorescent-lit room, decoding algebra and laughing. Yes, laughing. About how little sense the English language makes sometimes. She started bringing me drawings. I started bringing her muffins. No one called it love, but it was, and I began writing again. Not just notes and grocery lists, but actual pieces of myself, memories, observations, thoughts I never used to let out loud. I joined a memoir circle at the library. At first, I only listened. But one afternoon, I read a short piece about my mother's hands, how strong they were, and how I never really noticed until they were gone. People cried. So did I. And that night, I slept better than I had in months. I began noticing the world again. I'd walk to the market and buy fresh flowers for no reason. I'd compliment strangers. I'd look up at the sky and whisper thank you when the weather felt kind. The world hadn't changed, but I was awake in it. Neighbors began waving again, not in pity, but in recognition. The woman across the street, Pamela, invited me to a weekly game night. I declined the first 3 times. Then, finally, I said yes. I wore lipstick. I laughed too loudly. I lost every round of Scrabble and didn't care. And the strangest thing, I didn't talk about Talia, not in avoidance, just because she didn't need to be in every room I entered anymore. That was the rebirth, not a makeover, not a revenge body, just a quiet shift in gravity. I stopped orbiting her. I stepped back into the center of my own life. One evening, I came home and checked the mailbox. Among the ads and utility bills was a small envelope, cream-colored and handwritten, no return address. Inside, a note. Not long, not dramatic, just, I found the necklace, and I found your letter. I don't know how to say what I need to say, but I wanted you to know. I wore it yesterday. I thought of you all day. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know it was unsigned. But I knew the handwriting. I sat on the porch for a long time, holding that note like it was fragile glass. But I didn't cry. I didn't feel anger or joy or any of the things I expected. I just felt whole because that note didn't repair what had been broken. It didn't bring back years or mend photos or rewrite the wedding. But it acknowledged something, that I had mattered. And that was enough. I didn't write back, not out of bitterness. But because I had nothing to add, I had said what I needed to say already, in that necklace, in that letter, in the way I chose to move forward. She'd found it when she was ready, and I, in my own time, had found something too. that healing doesn't need an audience, that forgiveness can exist without reunion, and that peace doesn't always come with a door swinging open. Sometimes, peace is just a window cracked wide enough to let the breeze in. So I made myself a cup of tea, sat by the window, watched the sky dim into that deep, velvet blue that always made me feel safe. I didn't need to be anyone's mother in that moment. I was just Clarisse, quiet, alive, and finally, free. Fall came quickly that year. The air turned crisp overnight, and the leaves outside my window blazed into 1,000 quiet farewells. Amber, rust, gold. I always loved this season. There's something honest about autumn. It doesn't pretend. It doesn't hold on. It lets go with grace. I was raking the front yard one afternoon when I heard a car pull up, a dark sedan. Clean, quiet. The kind of vehicle that never used to show up unannounced. I straightened slowly, brushing a leaf off my sweater. The driver's door opened, and for a moment, I didn't move. Then, Talia. She stepped out in a long coat, her hair pulled back, eyes a little softer than I remembered. She looked smaller somehow, not physically but less certain, like the world had finally humbled her, or maybe she had finally paused long enough to feel it. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She just walked up the path, stopping halfway. "Hi," she said. I nodded. "Hi." There was a long silence, the kind that used to stretch between us when she was a teenager, too proud to say sorry, too scared to ask for a hug. "I was just driving through," she said, glancing around. I hadn't been by in a while. I didn't correct her. She hadn't been by at all, but that didn't matter now. "You look well," she said. I answered. Simply, she looked at the rake in my hand. "Still doing everything yourself?" "Huh." I smiled. "I like it that way." Another pause. She reached into her bag and pulled out something small. A book, my old writing journal, the one I thought I'd misplaced months ago. "I found this," she said, "in the guest room at the old house. I think I borrowed it once and forgot." She walked the rest of the way up the path and placed it on the porch rail. Not in my hand, not too close, just near enough. "Your writing," she added. "It's beautiful. Thank you." I didn't ask why she was really there. I didn't invite her in, and she didn't ask to come inside. Because some doors stay closed, not out of resentment, but because opening them would let the past back in uninvited. We stood there for another few seconds. Then she said, "I hope someday we can talk more." I nodded. Maybe that was it. She left. No tears. No dramatic apology. No hugging in the driveway. Just a quiet offering, left on a porch rail, under a sky about to snow, and I realized that's all I needed. Not validation, not reconciliation, just a moment of recognition that I had existed, that I had mattered, and that somehow my silence had spoken louder than all the noise she had once chosen instead. That night, I placed the book back on my shelf, next to a vase of dried hydrangeas. I sat at my table with a fresh cup of tea and began a new page. She came back, not to stay, but to see, and that, I think, is enough. I didn't expect anything more. I didn't hope for a weekly call or holidays together. I had already rebuilt my life in the spaces she left behind. But her showing up, even briefly, felt like closure, like a final period at the end of a sentence I'd spent years trying to finish. Weeks passed. The first snow arrived, and I kept living. I tutored Jasmine through her math finals. She got a B+ and brought me a thank you card made of glitter and stickers. I framed it. I brought pies to the community bake sale. I got a letter from a publisher. One of my short pieces was going to be printed in a local magazine. Nothing fancy, just a page in the back, but it felt like a prize. I smiled more. I laughed louder. I forgave, not because someone begged for it, but because carrying bitterness is heavier than walking alone. And every morning, I wore the necklace, not to remember who she was, but to remember who I am. So if you're still with me now, dear audience, if you've sat through every quiet page of this story, I want to ask you something. Have you ever given everything to someone and still been left behind? Have you ever poured love so fully into a child, a partner, a parent, only to watch them walk away like it meant nothing? If so, then you know, this isn't a revenge story. It's a resurrection. It's not about making them sorry. It's about making you whole again. So if today feels heavy, if you're waiting for an apology that may never come, let me tell you what I finally learned. You don't need their words to heal. You only need your own. If you've ever lived a moment like this, or are living it now, share your story. There's someone else reading the comments who needs to know. They're not the only one. Because sometimes healing begins not with answers, but with being heard